These podcasts do not cover all possible uses, actions, precautions, or side effects of the herbs or plants discussed and should not be considered medical advice or consultation. If you are taking other medications or drugs, are pregnant or breastfeeding, or have a diagnosed medical condition, consult your healthcare provider before using a medicinal plant.
Before I welcome you into my garden today, I want to take a moment to thank Mountain Rose Herbs. As a community herbalist, I look to Mountain Rose Herbs for superior products made by honest people in sustainable ways. From herbal ingredients to the teas and bath products that they are used in, Mountain Rose Herbs offers everything I need to stock my at-home apothecary and yours. Find them online at mountainroseherbs.com.
Right livelihood and redeeming work. A commitment to organics, non-GMO ingredients, and consciously wild harvested botanicals. From our farmers in the fields to our herbalists in the kitchen, we have a focus, and our focus is plants and the planet. We forego profit for quality, forego expansion for reliability. Our methods might be old-fashioned. Our work may be painstaking, but everything we harvest, everything we craft, and everything we ship must be held to the highest standards in quality. For our workers, for our family, for our farmers, and for the earth. In the early days, I lived a simple life off the grid in the Pacific Northwest. In the late 80s, after buying a little herb company that Rosemary Gladstar had started, I had no real idea what Mountain Rose Herbs would become. Just some big dreams from my small home-based shop. Sean and I have made it a priority to know the people who grow our botanicals, and we've cultivated relationships with many of the same farmers for 3 decades. We continue working with like-minded people who only want to grow plants in a way that's good for you and the environment. And throughout the years and all the changes, from the Pacific Northwest to around the globe, growing from 2 people to nearly 200, we've always wanted the same thing. With each plant we pick, each order we pack, and every delivery you receive, we do it with the best intentions for your health and the planet's health. Our goal is doing what's right. For us, it's people, plants, and planet over profit.
Welcome to the garden. In this space, you will find plants whose stories have been growing for years across continents, cultures, and generations. We will explore together their folklore, history, cultivation, medicinal properties, and culinary uses. Come within our circle and learn to recognize your green friends wherever you wander. I'm Joanne Bauman, and this is Heirlooms and Herbals. Today's herb is rose in its many forms. There are many species of rosa which were likely cultivated in Persia. However, most of our history of the plant begins in Egypt and China in the 5th century. Roses were painted on walls and personal items that were sealed in Egyptian tombs from the time, likely due to the fact that the ancient Egyptians believed, as well as being a healer, cosmetic, and aphrodisiac, the flower had magical properties. They even used rose in the process of embalming mummies, as its properties were said to extend beyond the grave. Meanwhile, in China, the emperor grew roses in his gardens, the oils from which only nobles and dignitaries were allowed to use. Confucius wrote that more than 600 books about roses were kept in the imperial library at the time. Even today, roses are beloved in traditional Chinese medicine to help issues such as digestion, improve the skin, aid in menstruation, among other things. The most popular story about how rose received its common name centers around the Roman goddess of flowers, Flora. In pain upon being struck by Cupid's arrow, Flora was unable to properly pronounce the word eros, instead making it sound like rose. From then on, the word rose became synonymous with eros and symbolized youth, vitality, love, and beauty. Today, the various colors of rose petals represent different things, from innocence and love to infidelity and mystery. Almost every country in the Northern Hemisphere has myths about the rose or contains historic examples of the flower used on coins, coats of arms, flags, seals, and artwork. Legends about the beloved plant feature gods, kings, and figures from most of the world's major religions, from Buddha and Muhammad to Vishnu and Jesus. The Romans loved roses so much that emperors scattered rose petals across their floors. As we mentioned, rose as an aphrodisiac, to seduce Mark Antony, Cleopatra carpeted her palace and chambers with rose petals and had her fountains filled with rose water. As for the creation of roses, there are too many legends to list. According to the ancient Greeks, white roses appeared from the sea foam that dripped off Aphrodite when she was born. In Christian theology, a rose bush formed after a drop of Christ's blood fell to the ground during his crucifixion. The first red roses in Persia were said to grow from the blood of a nightingale who flew down to embrace a beautiful white rose blossom and was pricked by the thorns. There is also the legend of the Cherokee rose, which is said to have formed from the tears of women on the Trail of Tears. The flower's white petals represent the tears. The gold center symbolizes the greed of those who forced the Cherokee from their ancestral lands. And the 7 leaves on each flower stem represent the 7 clans of the Cherokee people. And who could forget Chloris, Flora's Greek counterpart, who begged all the gods to change the dead body of a nymph she loved into the most beautiful flower in the world. The aid the gods gave varies from story to story, but most agree that Flora created the new flower. Aphrodite gave it beauty, Dionysus added nectar and its sweet fragrance, and Zephyrus blew the clouds away so that Apollo could shine down the sun and help the rose bloom. Thus, the Queen of Flowers was born. Now, we're not talking the long-stemmed, velvet red roses that come from the florist. We're talking about the untamed, undomesticated, uncultivated, wild roses that are extremely fragrant and give the best healing medicine. The dog rose, sweetbriar rose, prairie rose, and Rosa rugosa. You want to avoid hybrid roses like tea roses or floribundas because they're cultivars and their medicinal value more or less has been sacrificed, sometimes for deeper scents and bright colors. I grow Rosa rugosas, and that means wrinkled in Latin. And they flower in the summer, typically from May or June to September. They have magnificent, deep pink, 5-petaled flowers. Most rugosas are very tall. They're very shrubby. They typically have more dense foliage than other species of roses. They need plenty of room to spread out. And they're not particularly, I wouldn't call them invasive, but sometimes you do have to trim them up so that they don't spread and get too sprawling. They're not particular about their growing location or conditions, so rugosas can tolerate really sandy soil. If you're in Maine or Cape Cod or somewhere like that, you will find a lot of what they call salt spray roses, and rugosas tend to produce kind of large thickets, so they're a shrub rose. And In the springtime, what rugosas will do is they send suckers out from the roots. So we'll usually have to trim those down, or you'll have an even thicker growth. Or you can have other people come and dig those and start their own bushes. The rose hips on rugosas are larger. In fact, they're one of the largest rose hips, and those can resemble cherry tomatoes, so they're pretty good size. And the other nice thing about rugosas is they're fairly resistant to disease, and that in many places they're also used for soil erosion control. As far as when to gather parts of the roses, I gather the rose buds and the petals as they appear all summer, but you really need to wait until late fall or early winter to gather the rose hips. And waiting until that first frost to pick them will ensure a higher concentration of vitamin C in the hips, and they'll be sweeter. In fact, their medicinal properties almost double if you can wait and get them, after we've had a frost. When gathering the roses, be sure that you take only the petals, because the center, first of all, is what, the bees love that center. That's where the pollen is. But you don't want to pick that, because that is where the rose hip develops from later in the season. In the fall, the leaves of the rugosas will turn kind of a yellow golden. And so if you want to harvest leaves, one thing that you can do with rose leaves is make a tea of them for upset stomach. And you want to make sure if you're collecting leaves that you do when they're still fresh and green, so earlier in the season. And as always, never harvest where there might be chemical sprays or pesticides. So if you know someone and they have roses, be sure that they're not powdered or sprayed in any form before you use them. Rose can be prepared just about any way that you can think of. Teas, infusions, tinctures, vinegars, infused honey, syrup, elixirs. I also like to make rose water, rose oil. We can use rose petals in poultices. And there's just a multitude of ways that you can use roses in cooking. Roses teach us about boundaries, vulnerability, and tenacity. This plant teaches raw, wide-open love, complete with scars, thorns, and stubborn attitude. She teaches us that beauty is a bone-deep quality. The rugosas particularly, those petals are very wrinkled. In very hard years, her petals unfurl and they're skewed, they're wrinkled, but this doesn't mar her attractiveness. Rather, that speaks to her complexity of character and gives her more of that strongly scented medicine that she's known for. Rose, I think of a lot for the heart and also for the womb. So rose elixir, which is a honey brandy combination with rose petals, rose essence, teas, even rose oils or lotions. Those all can be good for deep sadness, loss of self-belief and purpose, and a fear of betrayal or being hurt. And I use rose elixir a lot for individuals. It's good for loss, and that's not just for loss of a relationship like a death, but any kind of life transition, any kind of heartache, grief, depression, fear, anything where that energy's been closed off or you're holding it within. Rose uplifts the spirit. It helps ease anxiety and tension, and it also has an antidepressive effect. It makes a wonderful heart-settling nervine that's suitable for anyone. It's generally enough even for children. In fact, the smell of roses has been shown to significantly decrease overactivity of that sympathetic nervous system, and it helps reduce that adrenaline output in the body. The wild rose elixir that I was talking about, where I take rose petals and I prefer to use raw honey, but you can also do that with vegetable glycerin, and I like to use brandy. Brandy and honey is the combination I prefer with rose petals. And when you get your rose elixir done, you can either strain the petals out or leave them in for a little while as medicine. I do that also when I'm making rose petal infused honeys. And if you have your rose elixir, you can also use that topically for burns and bug bites and sores and wounds and things like that. So the medicine of wild rose is something rather awesome. Wild rose tincture kills the cold virus in the laboratory, and it also generally enhances immune function through its cooling, cleansing effect. Rose is a standard remedy for any cold or flu type of illness. The hip is traditionally used, but I like to make a tincture of the petals and the buds and also the leaf. I also like to use rose when I make lozenges for sore throats, and you can look for the recipe in our show notes. Rose infused honey can also be used as a syrup for the same symptoms. And an infusion of rose petal and leaf can also help with sinus congestion, runny nose, or any kind of damp heat that's in the lungs. As always, you can use rose in tea or infusion form. You can use honey infused with rose petals. That can also be soothing, added to a tea. One thing that rose is really nice for is when kids are sick, because most kids are going to like sweet medicine. So if we can give them rose as a syrup or a honey, something like that, the kids are going to think that tastes pretty good. The other thing that we can do sometimes is combine that with something like lemon balm as a tea. That would help them, calm them, and it would also help things like strep throat or something like that needs soothing. Rose is very antibacterial, antiseptic. It's known as a skin nourisher, healer, soother for all kinds of skin types. It's an excellent addition if you're making lotions, creams, moisturizer, floral water splashes. You can also use rose leaf or rose petals on things like bug bites, cuts, and scratches. They form a protective covering, and like I said, with the antibacterial and antiseptic qualities, they'll really help with soothing those sores and cuts. If you have rose-infused oil, you can use that straight as is, or you can thicken that with beeswax into a salve. Rose water is a nice astringent or face toner for acne and irritated skin. Rose in massage oil has a very nourishing effect on the heart, the circulatory system. Diluted rose petal vinegar can help ease sunburns, and it clears that heat from the skin and can also help relieve some of the pain with sunburn. Sometimes if you're doing a recipe like Rosemary Gladstar's face cream and you need a wet component to add to that, instead of adding waters, you can use either plant-infused oils, or the rose and rich hazel would be a nice water component. So roses also tonify and regulate reproductive systems, and herbalists tend to find it very helpful in treating general pelvic congestion. So maybe if you're having thin or not very heavy monthly bleeding, cramps, water retention, cysts, mood swings, rose petal as an infusion that you would drink, or even topically as an oil rubbed on the womb or the pelvic area, can help ease menstrual cramping. So it's rich in building blocks of hormones. It helps nourish the endocrine system, and those basic hormonal elements can help during menopause. So again, many different ways. You can do rose honey, tinctures, teas, and it's an age-old aphrodisiac. So for both men and women, it helps open the heart to love. The entire plant is incredibly anti-inflammatory. Scandinavian studies have shown that rose hips and seeds significantly reduce the need for painkillers in individuals suffering from osteoarthritis. All parts of the rose offer anti-inflammatory help, and a rose petal liniment made in either vinegar or witch hazel applied topically can be beneficial for inflammation, nerve pain, traumatic injuries, sore muscles, and similar issues. With regard to inflammation, rose also excels at helping relieve that in the liver and gallbladder area. That same uptight, overworked, and congested liver can also cause any number of digestive symptoms, such as sluggish digestion, over-acidity, diarrhea, constipation, gastric inflammation, irritable bowel, and so forth. Rose can help these symptoms through addressing the liver problem at the root, as well as cooling, healing, and protecting the gut lining, assisting in helping things to move a bit better, and generally nourishing the mucous membranes. We talked about that a little bit with marshmallow. And rose petal infusions can also be effective for things like irritable bowel, where there's a lot of heat and inflammation. And again, combining that with soothing plants such as the marshmallow or slippery elm for that particular issue. There are several different major systems of traditional medicine that also consider the hips and flowers to be a tonic for weak kidneys and adrenals. Because rose stimulates the immune system, it can increase the flow of urine and has a mild disinfectant effect. So often rosehip tea can help relieve irritations of the urinary tract. Drinking like a large cup of tea as warm as possible 3 to 4 times a day to soothe urinary tract infections. And again, that's by no means the only plant for urinary tract infections. I think we discussed a little of that on our marshmallow episode as well. So rose hips are best known for their vitamin C content. And rose hips have even more vitamin C than oranges and grapefruits. So rose hips are rich in vitamins A, all of the B vitamins, selenium, calcium, magnesium, potassium, and the bioflavonoids, vitamin K's, just a lot of heart-healthy pectin, and so they're incredibly good for the body. Rosehip tea, some studies show, can help lower cholesterol, and even the rose petals themselves are rich in the polyphenols and the B vitamins and the bioflavonoids. Rosehip's nutrients are especially nourishing to the brain, and they're helpful for children to assist with things like increasing focus, attention, and concentration. You can make nourishing herbal infusions with rose hips. So sometimes I'll put the rose hips, an ounce of them, in a quart jar, fill it to the top with boiling water, and let that set several hours, sometimes overnight, and that will really pull out the vitamin C. Sweeten that, even if you sweeten it with a little rose-infused honey. You can make rose hips vinegar, rose hips infused oil, rose hip syrup. You can also make tea. You can also do that if you have some dried rose hips. To dry them, when I pick them, I will discard any that have any discoloration, or if it looks like the birds have pecked at them or something's chewed on them, I'll eliminate those. The ones that are good, I will spread out either in a flat drying basket. You can often dry things by just laying out a brown paper sack and putting your plant material on that, as long as you keep it out of really bright sunlight and in a kind of a cool, dry place. You just don't want moisture on the plants that you're trying to dry. That can take, a week or longer, and then you can put them into jars for storage. Keep those in a dark pantry or cupboard. With using roses, the caution that we have is traditional medicine considers rose to be strongly blood-moving, and it's not recommended in pregnancy, at least internally. So, if you're pregnant, using a rose lotion or rose oil for a body massage, that's fine. It's just in terms of drinking teas or tinctures or elixirs or things like that is more contraindicated. And rose is generally energetically cooling. So if you're the type person who's already on the cold side, temperature-wise or energetically cool. If you're going to do rose, you might just add it up with a bit of something warming, so ginger or cinnamon, something similar to that. So if you're doing a lot of rose tea and you already have a cool constitution, just add something in that to sort of warm up that cooling effect. And with that, I leave you until next time. Now go outside and enjoy the everyday bounty that your new knowledge brings you. And I encourage you to establish relationship with the plants. They're your best teachers. I'm Joanne Bauman. This is the Heirlooms and Herbals podcast, brought to you by the Mother Earth News Network. Thank you to the podcast production team, Charlotte French, Haley Casey, and Jessica Mitchell. Music by Akash Gandhi. I choose Mountain Rose Herbs to stock my apothecary because I trust the quality of their products and the ethics in which they were harvested.
Mountain Rose Herbs is a grower, processor, distributor, and retailer of certified organic herbs, spices, botanicals, and seasonings. We're a mission-based company. We don't sell products, we sell ideas, and we sell sustainability, and those two things sell the product for us. We have 13 certified organic farms throughout the Northwest. We've accomplished many firsts in Lane County and Eugene. We were the first zero-waste company. We have a bioswale, which collects all of our stormwater runoff. We're a solar-powered facility, and the list goes on and on.
My job here is to ensure that we are walking the walk. That we have sustainability in our messaging to our customers and to our employees, that we are a zero-waste company and we divert every piece of waste out of the landfill. Mountain Rose has a very strong community presence. We partner with so many nonprofits here in town. We make lots of donations, lots of charitable giving, and that's something that's really core in our company culture.
For us, it's double bottom line. It's people and planet before profit. And that's what differentiates us from a lot of companies, is that we've never put an emphasis on profit.